The billionaire CEO thought his pregnant wife had died in a tragic accident 4 years ago. Until one night, while dining alone, he saw a homeless woman begging outside, with two little girls who had his eyes. Stephen Reeves sat in the quiet glow of the restaurant's golden lighting, his tailored dark suit crisp against the white linen tablecloth, yet his posture heavy with silence. The hum of low conversation and clinking cutlery filled the space, but he barely heard any of it. His phone screen reflected in his tired brown eyes as he scrolled through the same news articles and business updates he had already seen that morning. The life of a 30-year-old billionaire CEO looked polished on the outside, but Stephen had long ago stopped feeling anything like success. 4 years. That's how long it had been since Emma vanished, pregnant, barefoot, and radiant in his memory. One moment she had been in their home, laughing softly in the kitchen as she stirred something on the stove, and the next she was gone without a trace. No signs of struggle, no note, no digital trail. The police had done what they could, then gave up. Private investigators bled him dry with hope and dead ends. Eventually the media lost interest, but Stephen never did. He had built empires, signed deals that altered markets, and led thousands of employees. But all of it felt hollow without her. There were no explanations, no closure. Only nights filled with whiskey and what-ifs, and dreams where she turned back to look at him, then vanished into darkness. That evening, he hadn't planned to go out. Usually he had dinner brought to his penthouse, where silence and solitude were familiar guests. But something inside him stirred, a weariness of marble countertops and curated isolation. He wanted something less perfect, more real. So he'd driven outside the city center to a modest local restaurant he remembered once taking Emma to. Years ago, before the boardrooms and the press turned their lives into something unrecognizable. He ordered something simple and barely touched it. The food wasn't the point. He needed noise, life, something unpolished. As he rose to leave, stepping into the cool evening air, he paused at the doorway and looked around, more out of habit than hope. That's when he saw them. A woman was sitting just a few feet from the entrance, on the rough pavement, a threadbare green t-shirt clinging to her frame, light jeans stained with dust. She looked worn, fragile, but her posture was protective. Flanking her on either side were two small girls, no more than 3 years old. They sat close to her, wearing matching yellow t-shirts and jeans, their small hands resting on her knees. Stephen's breath caught. The girls looked up at him, their brown eyes wide and alert and unmistakable, the exact same shade as his. He took a step forward, his gaze fixed on them. The woman raised her head. Time stopped. Stephen's heart thundered in his chest, louder than any boardroom adrenaline rush, deeper than any grief he had ever buried. Her face was thinner, her hair longer and messier, but there was no mistaking it. The curve of her lips, the structure of her cheekbones, the ocean blue eyes that haunted his every sleep. Emma. His world shifted beneath him. He didn't breathe, didn't move. His mind screamed 1,000 thoughts at once. Is it really her? Could it be? But even before logic caught up, his heart already knew. She was alive, and she wasn't alone. She had their daughters. Stephen stood motionless, his hands clenched at his sides, as the world around him blurred into insignificance. The night air chilled his skin, but he didn't feel it. All he saw, all he could see, was the woman on the ground and the two little girls at her sides. His heart beat so violently he thought it might tear through his chest. His lips moved before he could think. The name escaped him like breath from a drowning man. Emma! The woman flinched, her entire body reacting as if the name struck her like a physical blow. She turned her face fully toward him now, and Stephen took a step closer, needing to see her, needing to be certain this wasn't some sick illusion created by his mind after too many nights spent longing for the impossible. Up close, her face was gaunter than he remembered, her cheekbones more pronounced. She looked exhausted, with shadows beneath her eyes and a guarded, almost feral alertness in the way she held herself. But those eyes, those brilliant blue eyes, were still hers, and they looked straight through him, confused and frightened. The two girls clung to her now, their small arms wrapped around her waist. One of them turned to Stephen with a cautious, serious gaze. The other buried her face in her mother's side. "I'm sorry," the woman said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You must have me confused with someone else." "No," Stephen whispered. Emma, it's you. It's really you. I don't know who that is. She shook her head slightly, her expression unreadable. My name is Lily. Lily. The name hit him like a slap. For a brief moment, he stood there in shock, searching her face for any sign that she was playing a trick, that she recognized him but was somehow testing him, punishing him for not finding her sooner. But there was no flicker of recognition, no memory in her eyes. She looked at him as a stranger would, cautiously, curiously, and with a mother's instinct to protect her children. I don't want any trouble, she added gently, looking down at her daughters. Please. Stephen's breath caught. His throat tightened. I'm not here to hurt you, he said slowly. I thought, you look exactly like someone I lost. She didn't answer. What are their names? He asked softly, nodding toward the girls. The woman hesitated, as if afraid he was testing her. Sky and Lily, she said after a pause. Stephen blinked. The air left his lungs. Those were the names they had chosen, together, before she vanished. The name Lily suddenly made even more sense. If Emma had remembered only pieces of her old life, enough to rename herself after one of the daughters she'd carried, then maybe there was still something there, some fragile bridge between who she had been and who she was now. He knelt slowly, lowering himself to their level so as not to scare them. Hi, he said gently to the girls. I'm Stephen. Sky tilted her head, studying him with a strange seriousness for a toddler. Lily peeked out from behind her mother's arm and gave him a faint, cautious wave. Stephen looked back up at the woman. Please, let me help. You don't have to be out here like this. She didn't speak, but she didn't pull the girls away either. Let me get you someplace warm, he said, his voice steadier now, pleading without force. A hotel, a meal, anything. I don't expect anything in return. I can't walk away. Emma, Lily, looked at him long and hard. Then she looked at her daughters who were beginning to shiver in the night air. At last she gave a single nod. Stephen exhaled sharply, standing and immediately pulling out his phone. Within minutes, his driver pulled up to the curb. The woman hesitated before getting in, looking around as if the shadows might swallow her whole. He noticed how tense her shoulders remained, how she sat rigid in the car seat with the girls between them, her body acting like a wall of protection. As they drove toward the hotel, Stephen studied her in silence. He didn't want to push, but 1,000 questions screamed in his head. What had happened to her? Where had she been? Why didn't she remember him? He called his assistant and requested the presidential suite at one of his private hotels. He ordered warm food, clean clothes, toys for the girls, and a pediatrician on standby. Whatever they needed, he would provide it. When they arrived, he didn't follow her in. He handed the room key to her directly, keeping a respectful distance. I'll be staying a few floors down, he said gently. In case you need anything. I'll wait. She hesitated at the door. The girls were already inside, exploring the unfamiliar room with the cautious curiosity of children who had seen too little joy. Lily, Emma, turned back and looked at him for a long moment. Why are you doing this? She asked, confused and guarded. You don't know me. Stephen's voice trembled as he answered. I do, he said, more than anyone ever has. Then he stepped back, letting the door close between them. But in his heart, he knew. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The following morning, Stephen barely slept. He paced the floor of his hotel suite, the city skyline stretching in every direction outside the glass walls. His mind raced, torn between disbelief and a rising hope so fierce it bordered on terror. If she truly was Emma, and every cell in his body screamed she was, then how had the world failed her so completely? How had he failed her? He kept checking the phone, expecting a call, a knock, a sign. But there was nothing, not yet. By mid-morning, he made a quiet call to his private physician, Dr. Rayner, a calm, discreet professional who had worked with Stephen's family for over a decade. Without hesitation, Stephen arranged for a full medical evaluation, not just for the girls, but for Emma too. He emphasized the need for sensitivity, explained the amnesia, the trauma, the fragility of the situation. Dr. Rayner agreed to handle it personally and was on a plane within the hour. Stephen then contacted his assistant, instructing her to buy clothing, toiletries, healthy meals, art supplies, picture books, and plush toys. Everything he could think of to make the girls feel safe. He didn't know what their lives had looked like for the past 3 years, but he could see the wear in their clothes, the hollow alertness in their eyes, and the instinctive caution in every move their mother made. Around noon, Stephen gently knocked on the door of the suite he had given them. The knock was light, hesitant. He didn't want to intrude. After a pause, the door opened slowly. Emma, still calling herself Lily, stood there, her expression unreadable. She was dressed in the new clothes, a soft blue hoodie and clean jeans. Her hair, now brushed and tied back, looked shinier, less tangled, but her eyes remained guarded. "We're fine," she said. "The girls are eating." Stephen nodded. "I brought someone with me, a doctor I trust, just to make sure you're all healthy. No pressure, only if you're comfortable." She hesitated. Her fingers gripped the doorframe, as if bracing herself. "Are you going to take them away from me?" she asked. The question hit him like a punch to the stomach. "No," he said quickly, firmly. "God, no. I would never. I just want to help." That answer seemed to surprise her more than anything else. She glanced over her shoulder where he could faintly hear giggles and the sound of cereal crunching. "Okay," she said after a long silence, "but I stay with them." "Of course," he said. Dr. Rayner arrived soon after and conducted the exams in the suite's second bedroom, transformed for the moment into a temporary clinic. The girls were shy at first, but warmed up to the soft-voiced doctor quickly, especially when he produced lollipops from his bag. He checked their lungs, reflexes, and heartbeats. His smile never faltered. Emma sat close through the entire process, not letting them out of her sight. When it was her turn, she was stiff, silent, cooperative in the way someone is used to surviving, not living. Later, Dr. Rayner sat down privately with Stephen. His tone was grave but gentle. "She's clearly suffered a traumatic brain injury, likely from a physical assault," he said. "There are minor scars on her scalp consistent with blunt force trauma. She also shows signs of long-term psychological stress, malnutrition, sleep deprivation, and emotional dissociation." Stephen swallowed hard, fists clenched in his lap. "What about the memory loss? Post-traumatic amnesia. It's not uncommon in cases of physical and emotional shock. Her brain has locked away memories as a defense mechanism. Some may return naturally with time, others may not. But the fact that she functions so well, raises 2 children on her own, and shows strong protective instincts. That's resilience, Stephen. That's survival." Stephen nodded, his throat tight. "And the girls? Healthy, strong, but they've clearly lived without stability. They'll need structure, consistency, and affection from both parents." Stephen looked away, his jaw tightening. "She doesn't remember me." "Not yet," the doctor said. "But memory is a strange thing. Sometimes it only needs the right trigger." That night, Stephen didn't press for anything. He didn't try to explain or prove. Instead, he came back with picture books and sat in the living room with the girls while Emma stayed nearby, watching. He made silly voices for the characters. He let them correct him. Sky climbed into his lap. Lily offered him a crayon. He didn't speak about the past. He just showed up in the present. After the girls went to sleep, Stephen moved toward the door to leave. Emma followed him halfway. "Why are you doing this?" she asked again, her voice soft, more curious than before. "You still think I'm someone I'm not?" He turned to her, searching her face, those features that haunted his dreams for 4 years. "I don't think," he said. I know. I know your laugh. I know how you hated folding laundry. I know how you used to sing when you cooked, even when you didn't know the lyrics. I know your middle name. I know your favorite movie is one you're embarrassed to admit. I know you love thunderstorms but hate wind. I know you." She didn't answer, but something in her eyes flickered, an involuntary twitch of emotion, of uncertainty, of recognition buried deep inside. Stephen didn't push. He just added one more sentence before he left. "I don't care how long it takes. I'll be here, as long as you need." And with that, he walked away, hope quietly blooming again in the dark. The following days unfolded slowly, like the hesitant thaw of winter into spring. There was no sudden awakening, no dramatic surge of memory. Just quiet, careful moments, soft, almost imperceptible shifts that began to lay the foundation for something new. Or rather, something long lost and tentatively rediscovered. Stephen arrived every morning without knocking. He brought breakfast, warm croissants, oatmeal with honey, fresh berries. Sometimes Sky would greet him at the door with her stuffed giraffe. Sometimes Lily would hide behind her mother's legs. But every day, they let him in. Emma, still calling herself Lily, watched everything. She sat at the kitchen table in a clean sweatshirt, sipping tea, her eyes following his every move. He never pushed her, never tried to convince her of anything. Instead, he offered the girls normalcy, stacking blocks on the rug, drawing trees and cats with crayons, reading the same picture books over and over, always in funny voices. She never laughed, but once she smiled. Stephen noticed every detail. The way her fingers trembled slightly when she buttered toast, how she kept glancing at the girls, constantly checking on them, never at ease. The way she flinched at sudden noises, doors closing, elevators dinging. Trauma lived in her body like a silent second skin. He couldn't imagine what she'd gone through, and part of him didn't want to. The images that came to his mind were too unbearable. But he didn't need the details to understand the weight of what she was carrying. Instead of probing her for answers, he told her stories. At first they were small, gentle, carefully chosen. "Do you know where," he said one morning as they sat in the hotel suite living room, "when you were pregnant, you used to crave olives and ice cream? At the same time, it was disgusting. You said it made perfect sense." Emma blinked. "I hate olives." He grinned. "You did, but the cravings overruled logic." She didn't laugh, but she tilted her head as if trying to see herself through someone else's memory. Another day, he showed her an old photograph, one of the only ones he'd allowed himself to keep in his wallet. It was from their honeymoon. She was standing barefoot on a dock, wind in her hair, sunlight behind her, wearing a white cotton dress and laughing, her head tilted back. She looked alive in a way that almost hurt to remember. Emma took the photo cautiously. She stared at it for a long time. "That doesn't feel like me," she whispered. "But she looks happy." "She was," Stephen said softly. "You were." The girls were adjusting quickly. Children have a remarkable ability to adapt to love, especially when it's consistent. Stephen became their daily constant. They began calling him Steve first, shyly, cautiously. Then one morning, Sky curled into his lap with a sleepy yawn and whispered, "Daddy?" He froze. Emma heard it, and something shifted in her face, some mix of fear, confusion, and awe. But she didn't stop it. That evening, when the girls were asleep and the lights were low, Stephen stood at the balcony window while Emma hovered nearby. "I dreamed last night," she said abruptly, "about water. We were swimming. You were holding me." Stephen turned slowly, heart thudding. "That was our lake house. We used to go there every summer. I don't remember the place, but the feeling was warm, safe." He didn't speak, just listened. There was music, a song I didn't recognize, but I knew I liked it. We were dancing. His breath caught. "You love that song. Sweet Disposition. It played on our wedding night." Emma looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time, there was something in her eyes beyond caution. A spark, a shimmer of something unspoken and terrifying. She reached out, touching his arm lightly. Not possessively, not romantically, just contact, confirmation, something real. "I don't know who I am yet," she said softly, "but I don't feel afraid with you." Stephen's voice trembled. "That's enough. That's more than enough." After she went to bed, he sat on the couch in the dark, holding that moment like a fragile glass sphere. He wanted to believe this was progress, that her memories would return fully. But more than anything, he wanted her to feel safe, whether or not she ever remembered what they'd once been. Because now he was learning to love her all over again. Not just the woman she had been, but the one she was becoming. And that, he realized, might be the most sacred kind of love there was. It happened in the middle of the night. Stephen had fallen asleep on the couch in his suite, still wearing his shirt from the day, the television murmuring quietly in the background. A children's cartoon he had turned on earlier for Sky, and Lily still played on loop, now just a blur of colors and voices. He woke up to the sound of knocking, rapid, uncertain, almost desperate. He shot upright, instantly alert. When he opened the door, Emma was standing there, barefoot, her arms wrapped around herself. Her blonde hair was tousled, her face pale and damp with sweat. For a moment, she didn't speak. She looked lost, her blue eyes wide, haunted. "I remembered something," she whispered. Can I come in? Stephen stepped aside without a word. She walked slowly into the room, her movements tight, defensive, like she expected to collapse at any moment. She sat on the edge of the couch where he'd been sleeping and clasped her hands together in her lap. They were shaking. I was dreaming, she said, her voice barely audible. No, not dreaming. It felt like falling, like drowning in something too dark to see through. And then I heard voices, men yelling. I saw light, blinding white light, and then pain, sharp. At the back of my head, Stephen sat across from her, his hands resting gently on his knees, saying nothing. He knew not to interrupt. I was walking home, she said slowly, as if pulling each word from deep underwater. It was raining. I remember I didn't take the car that night. The tires were low. I didn't want to risk it. Her eyes closed, her voice trembling. I had just picked up baby clothes. Little onesies, yellow ones. I thought they were neutral, just in case. Stephen's heart twisted. He remembered that day. She had texted him a picture of them, laughing that she couldn't resist. I remember footsteps behind me. Fast, too fast. She swallowed hard. And then someone pulled me. No, shoved me. I hit the ground. I tried to scream, but something hit my head. Tears ran silently down her cheeks now. Her voice was thin, raw, almost childlike. There were two of them, maybe three. They kept saying something about my husband, about money, and then it just fades. Stephen's fist clenched. The rage was instant, visceral. He imagined those men, shadows in the dark, stealing her life away. For what? Ransom? Revenge? A message? But no one had ever come forward. No note, no threat, just disappearance. I woke up somewhere, Emma said. A place with peeling walls and flickering lights. I didn't know who I was. They called me Jane Doe. I didn't remember my name, but I remembered I was pregnant. I kept touching my stomach like it was the only part of me that mattered. She looked up at him now, eyes shining, mouth trembling. They thought I was a drug addict. They said I was confused. Nobody listened. So when the babies came, I just took them and left. I couldn't stay. I didn't trust anyone. Stephen moved slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. He sat beside her but left space, close but not pressing. You kept them safe, he said softly. You protected them. You did everything right. Emma gave a weak laugh, bitter and tired. I've been living in shelters, feeding them from church donations, hiding from people who weren't even chasing me. Stephen's eyes burned. He reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. You survived, he whispered, and you saved them. That's more than I could have ever hoped for. I didn't even know what to name them, she said. But the names, Sky and Lily, they were just there, like a whisper. Stephen nodded slowly, emotion rising in his chest. Because we chose those names, before you disappeared, that night in bed. You said Sky felt like hope, and Lily was your grandmother's name. Her lips parted in disbelief. She shook her head slowly, as if fighting to believe it. I thought I made them up, she whispered. You remembered, he said. Even when you couldn't remember yourself, you remembered the love. Emma leaned forward then, suddenly, her hands gripping her temples as if her skull might split apart. She sobbed once, loud and broken, and then another wave of memory crashed over her. She muttered fragments, a silver wedding band, vanilla candles, the way Stephen used to rub her back while she fell asleep. And then quietly, I missed you. Even when I didn't know who you were, I felt something missing every day. Stephen placed his hand gently on her back, unsure if she'd accept the comfort. She didn't move away. They sat like that for a long time, just breathing, just existing, in the middle of pain and memory and grief and fragile, fragile hope. At some point, her head rested against his shoulder. And in that moment, for the first time in 4 years, he felt something close to peace. Not because everything was healed, not because everything was fixed, but because the wall between them had cracked, and something real, something sacred, was starting to shine through. The morning after Emma's memories began to return was quiet, unusually so. The kind of silence that feels full, not empty. Like the world is holding its breath before something beautiful breaks through. The first light of dawn spilled through the tall windows of the hotel suite, touching everything with soft gold. Stephen had barely slept again, but this time it wasn't from worry. It was something deeper, a quiet awe that wrapped around his heart like warmth. Emma had remembered. Not everything, not yet, but enough. Enough for him to know she was coming back to herself. Enough to believe that the person he had loved, mourned, searched for, still lived beneath the layers of fear and pain. He made breakfast, not with hotel service, not with staff. He insisted on doing it himself. Scrambled eggs, toast, tiny smiley faces carved into strawberries. He didn't want to just be the rich man with resources anymore. He wanted to be a father, a husband, a presence. When Emma entered the suite with Sky and Lily holding her hands, Stephen's breath caught. She looked different, not just in the fresh clothes or the way her hair was pulled into a loose braid. She was standing taller. There was something in her expression, a new strength, even a flicker of recognition, that hadn't been there before. The girls ran to him without hesitation, climbing into his arms, giggling about how he'd drawn little animals on their breakfast plates. Emma stood back, watching for a moment, her lips parted in wonder. "You always made breakfast?" she asked quietly, walking toward the table. Stephen grinned. "Only on Saturdays. I was terrible at it." Emma sat down across from him. "This is perfect." They ate slowly, the girls chattering, Stephen and Emma trading glances that held more meaning than words could manage. Every time her eyes lingered on his face, it was like she was searching for old truths in new territory. And she was finding them. After breakfast, he showed her more pictures of their wedding, their first home, their trip to Rome. Some sparked nothing. Others made her pause, tilt her head, blink rapidly as if on the verge of grasping something just out of reach. When she saw a photo of herself laughing in a field of sunflowers, she touched the image gently. "I remember that dress," she murmured. "It had a broken zipper?" Stephen smiled. "You used a safety pin and called it high fashion." She laughed then, a real, full laugh that stopped him in his tracks. The girls spent the afternoon playing on the hotel balcony in a little tent Stephen had ordered. They colored the windows with washable markers and made paper crowns. He and Emma sat on the couch, sipping tea, the TV playing softly in the background. "I still feel like a stranger to myself," she said after a while. "It's strange remembering pieces, like trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle without the box." Stephen nodded. "Then we'll put it together one piece at a time." She was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned to him, her eyes searching his. "Why didn't you give up?" she asked. "Everyone else must have. 4 years. That's a long time to hold on." He exhaled. "Because I loved you. Because I knew somehow you were out there. Alive. I could feel it. And the idea of stopping, it felt like abandoning you. I couldn't live with that." Emma looked down, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. "I wish I could have found you sooner." "You found your way back," he said. "That's what matters." Later that evening, while the girls were drawing in the next room, Emma approached Stephen with an old letter in her hand. He recognized it instantly. It was one of the dozens he had written in the first year after she disappeared. He'd written them like prayers, storing them in a drawer he never opened. And now somehow she had one. "I found this in the book you gave me yesterday," she said softly. "I read it 3 times." Stephen's heart thudded. "I didn't mean to leave it there. I forgot." "I'm glad you did," she interrupted. "You wrote about how you used to feel the weight of the empty side of the bed, how you kept thinking the door might open, that you'd hear my voice in the kitchen. You wrote, 'I'd trade every dollar I have just to hear you breathe beside me again.'" She looked up, eyes glistening. "Stephen, I remember how you made me feel. I remember feeling safe. I remember feeling loved." Tears filled his eyes before he could stop them. She reached for his hand. "I don't know everything yet," she whispered, "but I remember us. I remember how it felt to be yours." He couldn't speak. He didn't need to. He just wrapped his arms around her and held her tightly, gently, like she was made of glass and starlight and something too precious for words. And for the first time in 4 years, they didn't feel like two people separated by time and pain. They felt like a family beginning again, a mother reborn, a father restored, and two little girls at the center of it all, laughing, playing, Loved. The news broke before Stephen had a chance to prepare for it. A hotel staff member, a young server with a sharp eye and an active social media account, snapped a photo of him walking hand in hand with Emma and the girls through the hotel's garden terrace. He hadn't noticed the camera, hadn't thought of the consequences. For the first time in years, he'd let his guard down, too caught in the quiet miracle of having his family back to care about the outside world. The next morning, his name was everywhere. Missing wife of billionaire CEO found alive. Miracle reunion. Stephen Reeves's family returns from the dead. Amnesia, kidnapping, and love inside the real-life fairy tale. Reporters swarmed the hotel. Paparazzi camped outside. Drones buzzed above the roofline like angry hornets. The world that had forgotten about Emma Reeves for 4 years now couldn't get enough of her. Stephen's phone exploded with calls. His PR team, board members, lawyers, distant relatives, even former friends he hadn't heard from in years. Everyone wanted a piece of the story, but Stephen wanted none of it. His only concern was Emma. He told his assistant to cancel his schedule for the next month. He called an emergency board meeting via video and informed them that he would be taking a personal leave effective immediately. For the first time since the founding of his company, he delegated control of his empire to his trusted COO and turned off his business phone. In a hastily arranged press conference, standing behind a simple podium in front of neutral drapes, Stephen made a brief, heartfelt statement. "Yes, it's true," he said to a sea of flashing cameras. "My wife has been found. She is alive. She is recovering. Our family has been given a second chance. And out of respect for my wife, our children, and everything we've endured, I'm asking for privacy. We're going home." He didn't take questions. He didn't need to. That afternoon, under tight security, they left Los Angeles behind. Their destination was a lakeside cabin deep in the woods of Northern California, a house he'd built during the second year of their marriage. Emma had designed the interior herself. Soft white walls, wide windows, warm wooden floors, and shelves full of books and plants. He hadn't been back since her disappearance. He couldn't. It was too painful, too haunted. Now, it felt like sacred ground. When they arrived, the girls ran through the overgrown garden with delighted shrieks, chasing butterflies and squirrels. The lake shimmered in the sun like liquid glass, and a soft breeze rustled the tall pines. Emma stood on the porch for a long time, just staring at the house. Her hand reached for the doorframe almost instinctively. "I remember this," she said, her voice barely more than a breath. "The lemon tree in the back. Squeaky floorboard in the hallway. The porch swing we were going to hang." Stephen nodded, unable to speak. Over the next few days, they settled in. Not into routine, not yet, but into rhythm, into peace. They cooked simple meals together, Emma insisting on making pancakes from scratch, even though she burned the first 3 batches. The girls helped decorate their shared bedroom with glow-in-the-dark stars and fairy lights. Stephen read to them every night, and Emma tucked them in afterward, pressing kisses to their brows as if reclaiming every bedtime she had lost. One night, as they sat on the back porch wrapped in a shared blanket, Emma turned to Stephen. "I feel like myself here," she said. Or, "Maybe I'm becoming her again. A version of me that existed before the pain, before the fear." Stephen looked at her, the firelight dancing in her eyes. "You've always been her, even when you didn't know it." "I was so afraid," she whispered, "that I'd never find you, that I'd raise them alone, that you'd moved on." "I waited," he said. "Every day, every night. I never stopped waiting." She leaned into him then, resting her head against his chest. "I don't want to be afraid anymore." "You don't have to be," he murmured. "You're home." In the weeks that followed, the world moved on. The media cycle shifted. New headlines replaced theirs. The cameras disappeared. The calls stopped. The silence returned. But this time it was chosen. Welcomed. Emma began to write again. Slowly, awkwardly at first. She kept a journal beside her bed and filled pages with fragmented memories, dreams, and gratitude. One day she showed Stephen a few lines. "Sometimes I don't remember the facts," it read, "but I remember the feeling of being loved. And that's where I start." The girls thrived. Sky developed a fascination with dragonflies. Lily took to singing made-up songs about breakfast cereal and clouds. They laughed constantly, danced barefoot in the living room, asked endless questions, and every time they called him Daddy, Stephen felt a tiny piece of his heart stitching itself back together. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the treetops and cast gold across the lake, Emma reached for Stephen's hand. "I want to stay," she said. "Here, with you, with them. I want this to be our forever." Stephen squeezed her hand gently. "It already is." They sat in silence, listening to the wind through the trees, the soft sounds of their daughters giggling inside, and the shared heartbeat of a family once lost to darkness, now found in light. And in that stillness, there was no more grief, only grace. A year passed. Seasons turned gently at the lake house, like pages in a book read slowly and with reverence. The pain of the past never vanished completely, but it softened, became quieter, woven into the fabric of their lives like threads of darker color in a tapestry full of light. Emma, Stephen, and the girls began to move through life not as people surviving, but as a family living. The girls turned 4 in June. They celebrated with handmade crowns and a picnic by the lake. Emma baked a lopsided cake covered in pink frosting and edible glitter. Sky declared it the most magical cake in the universe, and Lily insisted they eat it with their hands, which they did, laughing so hard that Emma cried, not from sorrow but from overwhelming joy. Stephen captured it all on his phone, his heart full in a way money had never managed to touch. Emma had changed, not in the obvious ways, though her eyes were brighter now, and her smile came easier, but in the ways only Stephen truly noticed. She stood straighter. She laughed more freely. The tremors that once haunted her hands had disappeared. Her confidence returned in layers, like muscle rebuilding after atrophy. She spoke with more conviction, moved with purpose. And she wrote. Every morning after breakfast, Emma sat by the window in her study with a steaming cup of coffee, her laptop open, her fingers flying across the keyboard. The words poured from her, first as fragmented reflections, then as stories, then, finally, as a book, a memoir. It wasn't about Stephen, not directly. It wasn't even about the violence or the trauma, though she addressed those things with honesty and care. The book was about memory, about identity, about what it means to lose everything and still find something worth coming back to. She titled it "I Remember by the Eyes," a phrase she'd spoken to Stephen one night in the dark after the girls had gone to sleep. "Even when I didn't know who I was," she'd whispered, "I remembered how your eyes made me feel. That was my compass." The book was published quietly through a small but respected publisher. They didn't market it as a celebrity expose. Emma didn't want fame. What she wanted was to give voice to women like her, women who had been hurt, lost, silenced, and made invisible. She donated the proceeds to a nonprofit she helped found, the Compass Foundation, a sanctuary for women suffering from trauma, memory loss, or abuse. The foundation became her second home. She worked closely with counselors, shelter workers, doctors, and survivors. She hosted writing workshops. She spoke at support groups. She listened. She cried with strangers. She held hands with broken mothers. She offered hope, real hope, not the kind wrapped in hollow slogans, but the kind built on survival and love and the possibility of healing. Stephen supported her every step of the way. He returned to his company part-time, but it no longer ruled him. He delegated more, trusted his team, and set clear boundaries. His greatest priority was home. Every evening, without fail, he was at the dinner table, helping Sky and Lily count the stars in their cereal bowls or listening to their wild retellings of fairy tales. The media tried to pull them back into the spotlight when Emma's book gained traction, interviews, documentaries, speaking tours, but she politely declined. She told them her story had already been told. She didn't want a stage. She wanted peace. And she had it. One day, the family returned to Los Angeles for a short visit. Emma had agreed to speak at a closed event hosted by the Compass Foundation, a gathering of survivors and supporters. The hall was small, warm, filled with women who carried stories in their eyes. Emma stood before them. No notes, no teleprompter. Just truth. "I thought losing my memory meant losing myself," she said, her voice steady and full. "But memory isn't just facts or names or places. It's the feeling of arms holding you when the world falls apart. It's the way your child calls you mommy, even when you don't recognize your reflection. It's the sound of someone whispering, 'I'm here,' and meaning it every single day. I found myself not by remembering everything, but by remembering who I was loved by and who I chose to love in return." The room stood in silence. Then came tears, applause, hugs, laughter. Afterwards, Stephen found her backstage. She looked radiant, tired, emotional, but grounded. "You were incredible," he whispered, wrapping his arms around her waist. "I was terrified," she admitted, resting her forehead against his chest. "But it felt right." Sky and Lily ran into the room, holding paper hearts they'd cut out at the event's art table. They handed one to Stephen, one to Emma. On Emma's, written in shaky 4-year-old handwriting, were the words, "Mommy, you make the world better." Emma cried then. So did Stephen. They returned home the next morning. On the porch overlooking the lake, they sat together in silence. The girls were inside building forts out of pillows and giggling uncontrollably. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of gold and rose. Emma turned to Stephen and said, "This is it, isn't it? The life we dreamed about?" Stephen nodded. "It's even better." She leaned into him, closing her eyes. And in that perfect quiet, with the wind in the trees and the sound of their children's laughter in the distance, Stephen knew this was the ending he had prayed for. Not the kind that closes a story, but the kind that begins a new one. One written with love, resilience, and the kind of light that never fades. This isn't simply a tale of reunion after loss. It's a story of resilience, grace, and the quiet power of love that endures through the darkest storms. The ending doesn't feel forced or unrealistically perfect, because the path to it was raw and honest, marked by trauma, fear, healing, and hard-earned trust. What makes the ending truly powerful is the stillness in it. The idea that love, when it's real, doesn't need to shout to be heard. It waits, it stays, it remembers, even when the mind forgets. That love can live in a voice, a touch, a child's laughter, and most powerfully, in a pair of eyes that once meant home. In a world obsessed with speed, with letting go, with moving on, this story whispers a different truth. Some promises are made for life. Some bonds, no matter how broken, are not beyond repair. And if love is true, it finds its way back. If you'd like, I can also write an epilogue, an author's note to readers, or a reflective final paragraph. Just let me know.